Imagine you are standing in a bright office. You meet a new person and hear the soft sound of a crisp paper card sliding out of a small leather case. The card feels smooth and cool between your fingers. It has sharp corners and a clean white color that looks very professional. This small piece of paper tells you exactly who this person is and how to find them. Today, we use these cards everywhere in the world to start new friendships or finish big deals. However, this simple tool has a very long history that began many hundreds of years ago in a faraway place. In the 15th century, people in China used small cards called visiting cards. These were very important for polite society and showing respect. When a person wanted to visit a rich family, they would send their name on a special piece of red paper. This paper told the family who was coming to their home. It showed that the guest had good manners and a high social status. These early cards did not have phone numbers or emails, because those things did not exist yet. Instead, they focused on respect and the person's family name. This was the very beginning of how we share our professional information with others. During the 17th century, the world of the rich changed in many exciting ways across Europe. In the beautiful country of France, life was full of art and special rules for how people should behave. This was a time when the way you looked and the things you owned were very important to your place in society. People wanted to show that they were polite and part of the upper class. Because of this desire to be special, a new tradition began to grow in cities like Paris. It was the rise of the visiting card. King Louis XIV was the leader of France during this period, and he loved everything that was fancy. He built the enormous palace of Versailles, and he wanted everyone to follow very strict social laws. To the king and his friends, a simple hello was not enough for a person of high rank. They needed something more physical to represent their presence in a house. These important people began to use small pieces of paper to tell others that they had arrived to visit. It was a very elegant way to share their name with others. These small papers were called visiting cards, and they became a necessary tool for every lady and gentleman in high society. Unlike the simple red paper used in China many years before, the French version was often like a small painting. Every card was unique and showed the personality of the owner. If you were a person of wealth, you did not want a plain card. Instead, you wanted something that would make people look with surprise. This was the beginning of an expensive competition to see who had the most beautiful card in the whole city. The design of these 17th century cards was amazing to see because they used the best materials. Artists would spend hours drawing borders with gold ink or painting tiny flowers around the name of the owner. Some cards even had pictures of buildings or family symbols to show where the person came from. The paper was thick and felt very smooth to the touch. Because there were no big printing machines yet, many of these cards were made by hand, by skilled workers who were very proud of their creations. It was a very slow process. The rules for using these cards were very strict, and people studied them to avoid making mistakes. When a guest arrived at a large house, they did not just walk inside and start talking to the family. That would be considered very rude. Instead, the process began at the front door with a servant. The visitor would hold out their beautiful card and wait for the servant to take it. This was the first step in a long dance of manners that defined how the rich people of France interacted with one another every day. Servants in these grand houses were trained to handle these visiting cards with the highest level of care. They would often use a shiny silver tray to carry the card from the door to their master. The tray was used because it was not polite for the servant to touch the card with their bare hands after the guest had held it. This action showed that the card was a direct representation of the guest's own hand. As the servant walked through the halls, the silver tray caught the light and made the moment official. Sometimes the person that a guest wanted to see was not at home or was too busy to receive visitors. In these cases, the guest would leave their card on the silver tray or in a bowl near the door. Leaving the card served as physical proof that the person had made the effort to visit. It was a way of saying that they were thinking about their friend. When the owner returned home later, they would look at all the cards left for them and see who had come to their door during the day. Because these cards were so important for a person's reputation, people spent a lot of money to make them look expensive. It was not just about the paper, it was about the social power that the card held. If a person had a cheap or ugly card, other people might think they were not successful. High society was a world where everyone was watching everyone else, and the visiting card was one of the first things a new friend would see. It was truly the face of the person in paper form. In addition to saying hello, these cards were the main way for people to make appointments for future events. If someone wanted to invite a friend to a dinner, they might write a small note on the back of the card. This made the card a useful tool for organizing the busy social lives of the French elite. Without these cards, it would have been difficult to keep track of who was visiting whom in the busy streets of Paris. They were the original social calendars for the rich and the powerful people. The language of the visiting card even had its own secret meanings that people had to learn carefully. For example, some people would fold a corner of the card to send a specific message without writing any actual words. A fold on the top right corner might mean the person visited in person. This secret language allowed people to communicate very quickly and privately in a room full of other guests. It added another layer of complexity to the social rules that governed the lives of the wealthy during this decorative time in history. It helped everyone stay connected in a very polite and elegant way. The world began to change in a very big way during the 18th century. Life was moving faster than ever before because of new inventions and expanding trade. In busy cities like London, the streets were filled with people looking for goods. Before this time, cards were mostly for high society and fancy parties. However, a new group of people started to see a different use for these small pieces of paper. These were the merchants and shopkeepers who wanted to sell their products to more customers. They realized that communication was the secret to making more money. These hard-working business owners created something called a trade card. It was quite different from the visiting cards used by rich lords and ladies in their large houses. While visiting cards only showed a name and were used for manners, trade cards were used for advertising. They were usually a little bit larger and made of thick paper to ensure they did not break easily. Every card was a small piece of art that told a story about a specific shop or a skilled person. People started to carry these around as they walked through the crowded markets of the cities. One of the biggest problems for people in the 18th century was finding where a shop was located. In those days, most cities did not have street numbers on the buildings like we have today. A person could not simply look for house number 22 on a street to find a tailor or a baker. Because of this confusion, merchants had to be very creative with their trade cards. They needed a way to guide their customers through the winding and often dark streets. The trade card became more than just a piece of paper. It became a very helpful tool. To help their customers, shop owners began to put small maps on the back of their cards. These maps showed the nearest famous building or a large church to help people find their way. They might draw a picture of a large bridge or a well-known park as a landmark. If a person was looking for a specific clockmaker, they would follow the instructions on the card. This made the trade card a very practical object that people wanted to keep. It was like having a small guide to the city printed on a single piece of high-quality paper. In addition to maps, these cards often featured a picture of the sign hanging above the shop door. Since many people at that time could not read very well, visual signs were extremely important. A gold lion, a blue bell, or a giant boot helped people identify the right store from far away. The trade card would show a beautiful drawing of that specific sign, so the customer could recognize it immediately. This was the early beginning of what we now call a company logo. These pictures helped people feel more confident as they walked through the noisy streets. Merchants also used their trade cards to tell people about the high quality of their products. They would list the different things they sold, such as fine tea, silk ribbons, or sharp metal tools. Sometimes, they would include a list of services to show how much they could do for a customer. A furniture maker might explain that he could fix broken chairs or build entirely new tables for a home. By providing all this information, the merchant was trying to build trust. They wanted people to know that their shop was the best place to spend their money. Because these cards were so important for business, merchants hired talented artists to design them. These artists would use metal plates to print beautiful and detailed images onto the paper. This process was called engraving, and it allowed for very fine lines and complex patterns. Many trade cards from the late 18th century are now considered beautiful works of art. They were decorated with flowers, birds, or scenes of people working in the shop. This beauty made the customer want to keep the card. A beautiful card suggested that the business itself was also very high quality and professional. As the 19th century arrived, the world experienced the Industrial Revolution, which changed everything again. Factories began to produce more goods, and more people moved from the countryside into the big cities. The competition between different businesses became much stronger than it was in the past. Every shop owner was fighting for the attention of the same group of customers. This meant that advertising became even more vital for survival. The trade card was the most effective way for a small business to stand out from the crowd. It was a physical reminder that stayed with the person. During this time, a new group of people called the middle class was growing very quickly. These were people like teachers, clerks, and small business owners who had some money to spend on nice things. They were not as rich as the kings, but they were not poor either. They wanted to buy things like books, nice clothes, and decorations for their homes. Trade cards were designed to appeal to these specific people by looking clean and respectable. The language used on the cards became very polite to show that the business was honest. This helped build a strong relationship. Shopkeepers found many different ways to give their trade cards to potential customers in the city. They would hand them out on street corners or leave them at local inns where travelers stayed. Sometimes, they would put a card inside a package when a customer bought something. This was a way to say thank you and to encourage the person to come back again. It was also common to give extra cards to happy customers so they could share them. This was one of the earliest forms of word-of-mouth marketing. The cards traveled from person to person. During the 19th century, the world started to look very different because of new machines and big factories. Before this time, people kept their social lives and their business lives very separate. If you were a wealthy person, you used a visiting card to say hello to your neighbors. If you were a shopkeeper, you used a trade card to sell your bread or shoes. However, during these 100 years, these two different worlds began to come together. People needed a single tool that could work for both parts of their busy lives in the growing cities. Social cards were still used with very strict rules during this interesting period of history. For example, if you wanted to visit a friend, you would give your card to their servant at the door. The servant would take the card to the master of the house on a small tray. If the master was busy, you would leave the card to show that you had stopped by to say hello. These social rules were very important for families who wanted to show they had good manners. It was a silent way of communicating respect to others in the community. At the same time, the world of business was changing and becoming more respectable for everyone. In the past, some people thought that selling things was not a very elegant job. But as international trade grew, being a businessman became a source of great pride. Doctors, lawyers, and bankers also needed a way to share their contact information without looking like they were just trying to sell something. They wanted a card that felt serious and formal. This led to a new style of card that was much simpler than the colorful trade cards of the past. This new style of card was usually printed with very dark black ink on clean white paper. The designs were not as fancy as the old cards, with pictures of gold and many bright colors. Instead, the focus was on the name of the person and their profession. The writing was often done in a beautiful style called calligraphy. This simple look showed that the person was organized and professional. It also made the cards much easier to read for people who were busy working in large offices or traveling to different cities for trade. People in the 19th century were very careful with their personal items and their reputation. Because these cards were so important, men and women did not just put them in their pockets, where they could get dirty or wrinkled. They carried their cards in small, beautiful cases. Some of these cases were made of very soft leather that felt nice to touch. Other people used cases made of shiny silver or even gold if they were very rich. These cases protected the cards and made the act of giving a card feel like a very special and important moment. If you walked down the busy streets of London or Paris during this time, you would see many people carrying these card cases. When two businessmen met for a lunch or a meeting, they would carefully open their cases. They would take out a clean white card and hand it to the other person. This exchange was a sign of trust and a promise of a future connection. Because there were no telephones yet, these cards were the only way to remember how to find someone later. They were like small pieces of paper that held a person's entire identity. The printing industry also played a large role in how these cards evolved during this century. New machines could print many cards at the same time for a lower cost than before. This meant that more people could afford to have their own personal cards. While the cards were simpler, the quality of the paper became much better and thicker. A thick card felt expensive and strong in your hand. People believed that a high-quality card represented a high-quality person. This idea helped to create the professional standards that we still use in our modern business world today. Women also used these cards in their own special ways during the 19th century. While many women did not work in offices, they were the leaders of the social world. They used their cards to manage their busy schedules of visits and parties. A woman might leave her card at several houses in one afternoon to maintain her friendships. Sometimes, she would even fold a corner of the card to send a secret message. For example, a folded corner could mean that she came in person rather than just sending a servant with the card. As the century moved forward, the difference between a social card and a business card slowly disappeared. The two styles merged into one useful tool that worked for almost every situation. This change represented a bridge between the old world of kings and the new world of international trade. The fancy decorations of the past were gone, replaced by the clean lines of the modern era. This shift showed that the world was becoming more practical. People valued clear information and fast communication as the cities grew larger and the pace of life became much faster. By the end of this period, the classic look of the business card was firmly established. It was a simple rectangle of paper that carried a lot of power and history. Even though technology was starting to change with the invention of the telegraph, the physical card remained the most popular way to connect. It was a small but very significant part of daily life for millions of people. This century truly set the stage for the modern business card that we use in our offices and at our meetings today across the entire world. In the 20th century, the world moved faster than ever before. This period, which began in the year 1900, saw a massive change in how people worked. Before this time, having a card was a luxury for the rich or for important business owners. However, as the global economy grew, the business card became an essential tool for almost every professional. It was no longer a symbol of high society alone. Instead, it became a common way for workers to introduce themselves in busy cities. The primary reason for this change was the development of new printing technology. In the early years of the century, big printing machines became much faster and more efficient. This meant that a printer could produce hundreds of cards in just 1 hour for a very low price. Because the cost was so low, even small companies could afford to give cards to all their employees. A young clerk or a traveling salesman could now have his own set of professional cards. This development allowed regular people to build a network of contacts and grow their careers. As more people entered the workforce, the office became a central part of daily life. In these offices, the business card served as a silent helper during meetings. When a person met a new partner, they did not have to worry about the other person forgetting their name. They simply handed over a small piece of thick paper with their information clearly printed on it. This simple act helped to build trust between strangers. By the middle of the century, the practice of exchanging cards was a standard part of doing business in almost every industry. The design of the cards also began to change during this time. In the past, cards were often very simple or perhaps too decorative with many flowers and patterns. In the 20th century, however, companies started to focus on their own unique brand. They added special logos and specific colors to make their cards stand out. This helped people remember which company a person worked for just by looking at the small design. A professional look became very important because a card was often the first impression a person made on a potential client. We must also consider the new information that appeared on these cards as technology advanced. In the beginning of the century, a card usually only had a name and an office address. Soon, however, the telephone became a common tool in every office. People began adding their telephone numbers to their cards so that clients could call them easily. Later, towards the end of the century, other things like fax numbers and even early electronic mail addresses began to appear. Each new piece of information made the card more useful and allowed people to stay connected across distances. In some parts of the world, the business card became much more than just a piece of information. In Japan, for example, the exchange of cards, known as meishi, became a deeply respected ceremony. This was not a quick or casual action like it often was in the West. Instead, it was a moment of true connection between two people. There were very specific rules that everyone had to follow to show they were polite and professional. Following these cultural rules showed that you had deep respect for the person standing in front of you. When two people met in a Japanese office, they would stand up and face each other with a polite bow. They would hold their business card with both hands at the top corners. This showed that they were giving their full attention to the other person. They would present the card so that the text was facing the receiver, making it easy for them to read. The receiver would also use two hands to accept the card. They would then take a moment to look at the card carefully and read the name aloud to confirm the identity. After receiving the card, it was very important not to just put it in a pocket or a bag immediately. That would be considered very rude, as if the person's identity did not matter. Instead, the person would keep the card on the table in front of them during the entire meeting. This allowed them to look at the name again if they forgot it during the conversation. At the end of the meeting, the card would be placed carefully into a special leather case. This treatment showed that the relationship was valued and the partnership was taken seriously. By the time we reached the 1980s and 1990s, the business card was a global phenomenon. Large international conferences brought thousands of people together from many different countries. In these huge halls, thousands of cards were exchanged every single hour. It was a golden age for the physical card because there were no smartphones yet. If you wanted to remember someone you met, their card was the only way to do it. People would often write small notes on the back of the cards to remember specific details about their new business friends. This century of growth transformed the business card from a tool of the elite into a universal bridge for communication. It represented the energy of the modern world, where anyone with a dream and a card could start a business. The card was a physical piece of a person's professional life that they could leave behind. It carried their name, their reputation, and their hopes for the future. Even as the century came to an end, the simple paper card remained the most popular way for people to connect and build relationships in the professional world. Today, in the 21st century, we are seeing another big change for the business card. Many people now use digital cards on their smartphones instead of paper. You can scan a square code called a quick response code to save someone's information instantly. This new technology makes it very fast to share your details without carrying heavy boxes of paper. Even though smartphones are everywhere, many professionals still like the feeling of a physical card in their hands. It is a physical memory of a meeting that a digital link cannot always replace. The small piece of paper represents a real human connection. The business card has traveled a long way from red paper in China to digital screens. It remains a powerful way for people to connect and build relationships. In some cultures, the way you give a card still shows how much you respect the other person. Whether it is a fancy card made of thick paper or a simple code on a screen, the goal is always the same. We want people to remember who we are and what we do. This tiny tool continues to bridge the gap between two people meeting for the very first time. If you have listened this far, please like and subscribe to follow our next videos.